I am Doug Friedman.
And I am Meredith Levy.
And this is Your Mental Breakdown.
It sure is.
The podcast, where we're casting pods at you, coming from two licensed psychotherapists and fairly well-acquainted people.
Ish. We used to be before COVID. Now we're just two faces on the computer passing in the wind.
Distant memories of not being so distant.
Why is it called a podcast? Should I not even be asking that right now? Because I should know the answer to that.
I don't know. I think back to the iPod as being, one of the first devices, and you could listen to something on your iPod. So that's what made it a podcast, but I could be wrong.
Fact checker. That would be Google. Hold on one sec.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with like it's radio for your iPod, but then it became everywhere and it blew up.
Oh my God! Yep.
Really?
Podcast is a portmanteau, which is a combination of words called of iPod and broadcast.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Glad we know the name of what we're doing.
Yeah. Did you have an iPod?
I still have one.
Really?
Well, I don't use it, but I keep it as a memory. Although my stepdad still uses one. It's so cute.
I had one. I gave it to my mom, and then she got an iPhone and everything was on the iPhone. And she said, "Oh, what do you want me to do with this iPod?" I'm like, "Oh, I'll take it." And I looked up and the original iPods were like selling for a nice chunk of change on eBay. And I got excited for like half a minute, like, wow, could this old iPod be worth something? And the answer is pretty much no.
Oh, sad.
Yeah. I was very excited to tell you two things this week.
Yay.
Number two, because, number two, is I saw the movie Coco, which you saw the other day and were telling me about.
Which I love.
It was fantastic. I loved it.
I told you.
I loved it. I mean, I had no idea what it was really about. I thought it was just going to be like Moana is to the ocean as Coco is to music.
Oh.
It wasn't. It was a family, like Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, like really nice, like honoring people. And it was really cool. Like it kind of fit with, to me, seeing, I guess, recently the movie Soul that came out, the Disney movie, right?
Yeah.
I think that's how we first mentioned it, is I said something about watching Soul and you're like, yeah, and I just saw Coco again.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you liked it and saw it.
Yeah. Awesome. Good recommendation. Thank you very much. And another recommendation, the number one thing I wanted to tell you.
What?
I can't believe I didn't know about this. And I mean, you really couldn't believe I didn't know about this. It feels like I have two brand new pillows because I washed my feather pillows.
No, you didn't.
I did.
No
I did.
Fucking way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
I don't even care
God.
that they're like clean and I killed bacteria. I care that like, holy crap, these feel like two brand new pillows. It's amazing.
Like refluffed, recharged, the feathers are stoked, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Oh my
Who
God.
knew? All you had to do was wash it.
Right? Well, think about it. It's like all of our hair, it gets fluffier when you wash it and dry it.
It makes sense. Yeah.
Amazing. Oh, I'm so excited. Yay. Everybody out there, take the pillow wash challenge. Let us know.
Absolutely. I love that.
Yay. I'm so excited.
Yeah. And it's, one of those things where, man, I'm going to do this regularly, like at least every 3 years.
Sure. I mean, why not?
Right.
And now the next thing to try is, do you have a down comforter or no? You have like a quilt?
Well, I have a quilt and I have a synthetic down comforter. I run really hot when I sleep. So I don't like a down comforter would be horrible for me because it would make me way too hot, but I like feeling the weight on me.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
So, but you should wash that too.
I've washed the comforter. That I've done. That made more sense to me at the time. Now pillows make sense. Like I'm fine. It makes sense now.
Okay.
Good. You've converted me.
Good. So glad to hear. Okay.
The only thing I don't wash are like my bath towels because those, they're just touching your clean body. So why would you need to wash those?
Oh my God. I've never thought of that. That's so funny. Not that you shouldn't. Obviously you should, but that when you use them, they actually touch your clean body, not your dirty body. I know we still have a bunch of dirt and shit on us, but yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. The things we didn't know.
Yeah.
Speaking of things we didn't know, this is not the segue to the show. That segue will come up organically later.
Okay.
I was talking to a client the other day. Wow, that sounds like the beginning of a joke. I was talking to a client the other day. These two clients walk into a bar, which is silly because after the first guy walked into it, the second guy should have seen it.
Boom.
Oh, yeah, thank you. The client said something really cool, which was he used to be really scared of bees. And he had just experienced his first bee sting, 30-something years old, just got his first bee sting. And he was like, yeah, it kind of hurt, but it wasn't that big of a deal. So now, like when I see bees, I don't like go high stepping and freak out. I'm just like, yeah, okay.
Right.
Big deal. If it stings me, I know it hurts a little bit and it's not that bad.
Right.
And it was really cool because we were highlighting fear and anxiety and how and we talk about this a lot. The thing itself is not as bad often as the anxiety leading up to it. And for him, it was like 3 decades worth of being so scared of bee stings and what it might mean and what it could be. And it was anytime he saw bees around him, just getting that fear response. And when he actually went through it and was like, oh yeah, not a big deal. It's okay. Doesn't mean you like it.
That's awesome. No, but also thank God he didn't go into anaphylactic shock and have all his fears just confirmed completely and totally. Yeah.
Right.
No, that is cool though. Especially when it's something that is like that. Cause like if I actually think about it, how fearful I get of bees and like run away and freak out. And like, the truth is he's right. Like it hurts, but it's not that bad. If I can avoid it, I will, but I also don't need to like trample over children to get away from one.
I still do.
Do you want to know? Well, I have 2 really big phobias, quote unquote phobias. Balloons.
Balloons.
Yeah.
Popping or just balloons?
No. Oh, no, balloons because they pop and it's inevitable. And I never know when. And the anxiety I have being around them is so intense. Usually when they're around kids, if there's balloons like at a party hanging up at the ceiling that no one's fucking with, I don't care. It doesn't freak me out. But I've had to pick up balloons before, like for my niece's birthday party or something. And I am just like the whole time dying. They're all in my back seat. Wow. They're all flying around. They're going to touch me. They're going to static cling my hair and then they're going to fucking pop. And it is, I cannot tell you, it's gotten worse over time. God forbid I have to watch somebody make balloon animals. It's not as bad though, because it's the pop from the huge balloon. The pop is like, it's different than if a little part of the twisty animal balloon pops, but I'm not, that pop.
I love the static cling of balloons. That's fun, but I'm with you on when they're so filled with air and so taut and like that, that freaks me out. And that phobia translated for me to guitar strings. When I'm tuning guitar strings and like changing my strings and tuning them up, the high E, the very highest note, which is it's the thinnest string. And I have popped it so many times. And every time it scares me and I would wind it. It's why I actually wound up tuning my guitar down half a step, because I didn't want it so tight, because I would start tuning it and turning it. And I would get so scared that it was just going to snap. Oh my God.
That's amazing.
Actually, a couple of times while I was doing that, it did snap. And I've been like snapped and it would smack my fingers and cut my finger a little bit. And like, my fear was realized, but I don't know. I've probably changed guitar strings hundreds of times and maybe it snapped like 3. So it's not that common, but still it's similar to that balloon fear. Like it could pop and you don't know when and at any time. And it's the jack in the box, like twirling it. And when is it going to pop out?
Yes. And I have the same one with filling bike tires and car tires until I learned it is almost impossible to pop them. It's not impossible, but it's almost impossible, because I'm like, I'm going to kill myself if I explode this thing. But I've realized now that's, so now it's much easier.
What's your other phobia?
Going down escalators, especially going down escalators in heels when they are not the narrow ones where I can put both hands on the railing. That's not an option. The shoes come off. That's it. But just going down escalators, I'm that person, like a little kid who has to wait for the step and didn't get it on time. Yeah. I don't like going down. Shut up.
That's a whole other fear. the escalator thing, do you have any trauma of having fallen or any experience? Because my mom, we grew up with her having that same fear that, we'd be in a department store and my sister and I would just go right down, no problem. And there would be my mom at the top, still like trying to time it, waiting for it, getting it perfect. And as a kid, she fell down an escalator once.
Oh, no. Not that I remember. I don't know. Maybe I'll do some trauma work and see if there's...
Right. I mean, yeah, you have this whole blackout period of 0 to 3.
Right.
And, 19 to 23, but that's different.
That you're not wrong with those years too, by the
way. Right. Speaking of blackout years.
Speaking of,
right.
What do we got coming up?
We have, I think we got deep on this episode a little bit. I mean, we've had a constant running theme lately of Drew kind of finding himself and being an empowered individual and learning how to just feel him.
Right.
And I think that was coming out more as he was back home in this episode. He was back home in this session. He was back home in Seattle for a little bit. I think this was actually the funeral of his friend who had passed away, and he had been back for a service, but this was the actual funeral coming up.
Right. Okay.
Some stuff definitely got stirred up, and and we will break it down for you in just a minute.
We'll be back.
So me and a friend, we're talking out on my balcony and just kind of talking about like why I'm in therapy and what's the point of it. And for honestly, the first 2 months, I needed it really bad and I didn't know what to do without it. And then I kind of like grew to a point where I was like, well, I'm working out in the gym, I'm going to church. This is my third. Because I think you got to work out your mind, body, and soul.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people miss that. Everybody works out in the gym and some people go to church or whatever their capacity for that is. I think everybody forgets about their own mind. Like that is just crazy to me because it's the most powerful muscle you got.
Totally. Yeah. I've had clients say to me, you'll take your car to the shop regularly. You might get a physical once a year. If you're good, you go to the dentist twice a year, maybe more, right? But you don't really get your mental health checked out very often at all. Most people just don't. They only go when there's something wrong.
Like which is why I started.
Right.
Exactly.
And the idea, I think, is it can be preventative. You go to the doctor when something's wrong. You also get a checkup once a year just to make sure you're okay. And sometimes, like you said, going to the gym or going to church, you keep going regularly to stay fit.
Right. Yeah. And the more you exercise and the more you do it, I think the easier it gets. And the more clarity I see week after week, it's like, okay, we built off last week. Let's keep going. What are we doing? I think this is a really healthy weekly routine.
Yeah.
To where I can just kind of be.
I want to lean into that a little bit.
I think for me, I'm very good about opening up and being authentic to like 70%. And once you hit that 70%, that last 30 is really hard for me to open up. Where here I can be fully authentic and just kind of let it all out and be. I don't really have to think about what I'm going to say before I say it. It's just I can say how I'm feeling and kind of dive into that as we do deeper and deeper and deeper, which is, I mean, it's freeing. It's all around freeing.
I'm loving this because that realization is one where as a therapist, I'm going to kind of spin it as, well, that freeing sensation that you have in here from truly being authentic, that closer to 100% or just a different 70%. It's just, here I am, me. I don't have any of those guards, any of those defenses. Can we imagine that taking place outside of this room too?
Yeah, I think this has given me like more of a starting spot. For the last 24 years, I was kind of swinging on our pendulum and I didn't really know where I was at. And it was so far each way. And understanding just that alone and then throwing in the 10% of disappointment, like those two things alone for me have really given me a good grounding to where I can go use it. I mean, red car, white car, I mean, we can go on, green beret and all of this, you know what I mean? Right. And so it's like, it's stuff in here that allows me to lay the groundwork for when I'm out in the real world doing my shit and not freaking out and having panic attacks and completely folding and just bundling up and not being able to do anything anymore. My mom called me the other day about this whole money situation that happened in Vegas. And it's a lot of money, but I personally am not worried about it. And she's so upset, disappointed and all this stuff. And okay, I'm glad I'm bringing this up. This was a big thing for me last week. We had a conversation. I told her my plan. I'm like, don't worry about it. Like, I got you. Give me 2 weeks and like, it'll be just fine. And I know they're not hurting for what this is. Like, it's not that big of a deal to them. And so she relays back to me, it's all going to be okay. I got you. Don't worry about it. This is between us. Like, I won't tell your father. Not that I wouldn't want her to tell him, because that's her husband and this matters to him and it's his money too. Like, he should be involved in this.
Right.
But she told me she wouldn't. And then my dad calls me the next morning, what the fuck is this? And so for me, it wasn't the fact that she told him. It was that she told me she wasn't going to and then did anyway. And again, is lying to me in whatever capacity.
That betrayal.
Yeah. And so I instantly called my ex-girlfriend and I was like, hey, I'm coming home next week, but I'm not going back to my house. Can I stay with you? I was like, I'm not dealing with that. It's not my problem. It's her own shit. I don't know what's going on there, but I can't deal with that right now. And I knew that I had to be selfish for a second. So I think I was giving myself that compassion piece of knowing what I can and can't handle right now, especially going into next weekend.
And protection, right?
Right.
We talked about way back for Bachelor Party, but you were looking for an out. And I think your dad gave you one, your brother gave you one. And I said to you, one of the secrets of life is the out comes from you.
Yeah.
It sounds like what you just did was gave yourself an out. Whether or not you actually stay with your old girlfriend or stay with your family, you gave yourself an out. So now as you think about, I'm going to be home and I could stay there or I could go home, I have choice.
Which was, it made me feel a lot better about going home. And I've talked to my mom since and we're good. Everything, we worked it out. That piece of her lying to me is still there. And that's why I don't want to go home. That's why I don't want to see her. It brought up a lot of everything else. Like, it brought disappointment out of me into her for all these other reasons. And this is my choice to go back for this weekend. And I do have an out, which is why I think it's okay for me to now want to go home.
Let me ask you a couple of things to see if you could do these also.
Yeah.
And I'm not asking because any one of them is right or wrong. We're just looking at the trails in your head. Like,
yeah.
Could you? And what would that be? Just entertain these. Could I not see my mom at all?
No. Yeah, no.
No. Why?
I can't go all the way back to Seattle, be 5 minutes away from her and not see her. Yeah. Whether that's for a couple of days or a quick coffee, like, I'd have to see her at some point.
Like, why do you have to see her? Is that for you, for her, for dad?
I think that's my regret aspect of my life. Well, what if something happens tomorrow and then I don't get the opportunity to see her and then I don't get the opportunity to tell her I love her in person? And
yeah. So I hear that as that's more for you than anybody else.
Yeah.
And it's for you guarding against regret, guarding against that. But it's still you being authentic. What we used to say, the son I want to be is one that'll see his mom.
Yeah.
Could I see my mom and dad and not talk about money?
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Could I talk about money?
Yeah.
All right.
And backtrack one, I can go and not talk about money. I don't think they can. Because I know the conversation's coming. Could I talk about money? Yes. But I'm going to shut down. I'm going to be like, okay. Yes, no. Okay. Not really have a conversation.
Yeah. So you're alluding to the next question a little bit. Could I openly say I don't want to talk about money, whether or not they bring it up?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it okay if they keep going?
Yeah, but I'll leave.
Why?
Because I don't want to deal with it.
I think in an empowered sense would say, because I have a boundary. I say I don't want to talk about money and they pushed it. I will talk about it eventually, but not right now.
And again, like, me going home this weekend is for one of my best friend's funerals. And for me, for them to even bring that up while I'm home would be a huge slap in the face. I need them to give me the capacity to be this weekend and not have to deal with any of that. And if they want to talk about it after the fact, okay, sure. I'm going to see them in 2 weeks anyway. So it's like I have time to go talk to them and all this will be sorted out by then anyway.
Right.
So it's...
And this isn't the time, this isn't the place.
No.
I need them to give me that capacity.
I want it. Yeah.
Okay. So I want that capacity. I'm going to give myself that capacity.
Yeah.
That took a while.
Yeah. I think the difference between the two, to me, for them to give me the capacity would be able to let me still talk and be around and not bring up shit like these conversations that I know eventually are coming and they know what's going on too. We're on the same page there.
Yep.
Just to put it on hold and just be for a weekend. For me to give myself the capacity would be me in the garage smoking by myself kind of separating myself and not being around and just being out of it.
Yeah.
Which I don't, that's why it took me a minute, because I don't want to be there. I would much rather be in the first position. And I think the second is more, to your point, a defensive.
I remember working with kids and they would do the bubble, right? They'd put their arms in a circle in front of them.
Yep.
Here's my bubble. You can't invade my bubble. I'm safe in here. And a bubble is, I think, protective, where we talk about your boundaries, what you're okay with, my personal space, my personal bubble.
Yeah.
So I wonder if I can give myself that capacity is going, here's my bubble. Can't control whether or not they're going to invade it, but I can control whether or not I'm around them.
Right.
You can go smoke in the garage. You can also go, whoa, hang on, my bubble. I have boundaries and I let you know them, and you are now overstepping them, and I can't control you. I'm not going to say, don't do that. You can't do that. You can, and you might. I'm going to take my bubble somewhere else. This isn't the weekend to talk about this.
Right.
I'm not okay with this. Clearly, we can't control what they say or don't say. That's one of the issues. You know, it's going to lead me to one of my next questions for you of the coulds.
Yeah. Could
you say to your mom, hey, really disappointed that you told dad after you said you wouldn't?
Yeah. Yeah. You see it.
Yeah.
I don't think it has to be, but it's situational.
I don't buy that. Dig into that a little more. There was something else on your face.
My worry for all of those conversations is that it's going to bring up a lot more than I'm ready for.
That's where it is.
And that's what I'm afraid of.
Yep. Because that's all of my past experience of betrayal, being lied to, something not being the way I thought it was. That's a lot. That's a lot of weight. And that might be stuff that we unpack before we thrust that upon mom in a way. Because we've talked about, I don't know how to say this. I don't know where to start. I don't know how it comes out. And I think part of that is I would like to someday, but I don't feel like I can now.
Yeah, because I mean, even right now, I'm still where I was at when I was 12 with my mom in conversations. I've been looking for jobs and what's next. And, we've been talking about that for the last couple of months, and got a job offer in New York. And it was super sick and something I was like, oh yeah, I could see myself doing this. This sounds dope. And so I'm like, hey, got a job offer in New York. It's going to pay a lot of money. We're good. Like, I told you, it all worked out. And she instantly starts bawling. And I'm like, what? And she was like, I don't want you to move to New York. You can't move to New York. And so I instantly was like, okay, well, I'm not going to New York then. And then I got off the phone with her and I was like, what the fuck am I saying? I'm going to New York. And yeah, I was like, I cannot let her dictate this part of my life anymore.
Right.
But that was still my first reaction. So my conversations are still there with her. And that's the part where I need to grow a little bit more.
And of course, you said it's still the 12-year-old me, right? That scared little kid. You've got an awareness of that, which is great. And we're building that strength in you, that ego strength. We're carving out something different in your brain. I think part of it isn't just, I'm not ready for it. Because you can get ready, but it's, this might sound harsh, but letting go of that it might devastate her.
Yeah, I think on the first initial hit, it's super freeing because then I don't have to carry it.
Right.
And instantly following that is, I don't know if guilt's the right one, but somewhere close to that, of still feeling responsible for her feelings. Even though letting go, I still feel responsible.
Yep.
And that's scary.
Yep. That's her well-being depends on me. Is that true?
No.
Right. We have to prove it to ourselves to be true. And we have to be okay with, it's okay for people to be disappointed. Leaving room for that is really tough, especially because you've had startling experience of her not being okay. But you took it on as my fault. If only I was better, if only I was gooder, more good, right?
Yeah.
Then she wouldn't have done this. This wouldn't have happened. She would choose me over drugs or whatever it might have been, which is an old story. And there's something at some point we can revisit in terms of your brother. I wonder what his memory of that night was. His movie, right? Being a lead actor. And it might have been, I'm trying to do the heroic thing by protecting my little brother and saying, don't go out there. It's okay for her to be disappointed. It's okay for this. Don't do it. I'm protecting you, right? He might have been protective big brother.
Yeah.
It just came out a little fucked up.
Right. Yeah, because I think we were both in the same spot. We both wanted our mom to be okay.
Yeah.
I think about that not often, but I do think about it now since we've talked about it, of that flip. Because I always figured he was just trying to be the bossy one, take control and have the power of the situation versus the protection. And knowing him the little that I do, he's very protective in that sense. So I'm choosing to believe that was his mindset and where he was at. I think it's true.
Yeah. And look, maybe, he was a kid. You were a kid. You're both kids. You don't really know what you were thinking. And we can't hold yourselves accountable for what you were thinking at age 15.
Yeah.
And it's a narrative that's been proven true to you for so long that we're just now trying to unpack.
Yeah.
I have no idea what your brother's version of it is. But for you guys to talk as adults, very different from when you guys were young teens. And part of looking at the snapshots now is just how do you make sense of then with this picture of you?
Yeah. I honestly don't think at this point in my life, the last 15 years necessarily hold any power for my next 15. But I don't want to lose the last 15 because of what it's meant to me on a couple different levels, good and bad. Because I appreciate people a lot more because of these last 15 years than I ever would if I didn't do what I've done. So I don't want to forget it. But I also think that's where my forgiveness comes in. And I don't think I've forgiven my mom for what she's done either. And I don't think I've forgiven my brother by any means.
What has he done?
I feel like he turned his back on me in a lot of different ways. That's why this next weekend's really kind of bringing back a lot of my junior high days, because friend was my bully, which is crazy because he became my best friend.
Yep.
But brother wasn't there when I needed him the most. He wasn't there when I needed him.
And certainly not in the capacity I needed him. There's a lot that's going to swirl for you this coming weekend.
Yeah.
It is going back to an earlier time because it's those people and those relationships. And it might trigger some feelings of being that young and having parents and not having brother. And it will bring you back for sure. Leaning into, remember me saying, double down, don't shut down, that nostalgic piece that is sadness, or there might be some twinges of regret or guilt or whatever it might be. That's where the compassion for self piece kicks in.
Yeah. I know I have to feel what I'm going to feel this next weekend. I don't really look forward to it, nor do I want to go through it.
Right.
But I have to. And I know that now based on kind of what's happened over this last year. But I think I want to say prepared. I don't know if that's the right terminology, but I feel more prepared going into this weekend than wedding, brother, anything. Just more so on the sense that I'm going for a friend and myself and what that meant to me and not anything else.
Yeah.
I don't have to go see anybody. I don't have to be around anybody. It's not like that.
What'd you have to do to prepare?
I think just time and going through and getting new milestones and seeing that things are going to be okay, even though I'm going through shit. And I've said that before, I'm not okay and that's okay. And I think that's going to be my motto next weekend,
right.
And a lot of people are going to hear it. My only fear, and I've had this conversation with old girlfriend, because we were talking the other day and she was like, I'm going to see you next week. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to try, but I'm coming home for a funeral. This isn't about me seeing you.
Right.
And she was like, well, can we go together? Can I sit with you? Can we be together? I want to be there for you type of thing. And it was hard for me because I was like, I really appreciate you wanting to be there for me, but this is not where we're at. And that's not what this is about. And I tried to voice that to her, but she still wasn't really getting it. And I don't want to disappoint her going into this weekend.
You stalled on that. Why?
Because after everything I just said about how I'm going back for myself and friend, I don't want my mindset even be close to disappointing old girlfriend, because it doesn't, it matters, but it doesn't matter this weekend.
And I hear you trying to walk the authentic walk and still be sensitive to somebody else. And I hear you kind of saying, I'm going to be going through stuff.
Yeah.
Stuff's going to come up. And I want to stand on my own 2 feet for that. I don't know that I'll need to lean on somebody or want to.
Yeah.
So I just want to be there. Well, can I be there with you? You can be there also. I want to be present as myself and see how that is. I've been working on it. I don't know if you want to say that. I've been working on myself and strengthening myself. I really need to walk through it this way. And it's a quick trip. And I really just want to be there for that. And I will probably see you there. But where my headspace is strengthening myself and allowing myself to feel what comes up.
Yeah. I'll say stuff to her, but she won't take it or she won't reciprocate it in any fashion. And it's very frustrating. She's one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life, but she's so naive and so not. She's in 2 and I'm in like 6. There's situations like this where I need that 6 and she gets to make maybe 3. And that's where the disconnect. And I don't know how to talk to her about that because I don't want to
disappoint her.
Yeah.
I don't want her to feel what I've felt before with rejection or abandonment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, very thoughtful, caring guy. And I think the best you can do sometimes is to just kind of narrate that and say that that's what it is and stick to your own boundary and allow somebody else to be disappointed. Right. I think you're super close to that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of how you're talking about this.
Yeah.
And it's just getting more experience with this. And this is where the double down, not the shutdown, comes from, because it's acknowledging like, yeah, I can tell you're disappointed. I'm sorry that you feel disappointed. I really need to do this for myself in this way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's on her. She doesn't understand that.
Absolutely. It's not your job to help her through that and help her see that. It is your job to carve that new trail for yourself of, I can take care of myself and here's my boundary and here's what I'm okay with and here's what I need for this trip and I will speak up for it. It's not being a dick about it. It's actually just that bubble that here's my space. Here's what I'm protecting. And I think you've got great opportunity to do the same with your parents.
I know. I was just going to say, I think I'm going to have that practice a lot this weekend.
Yeah. And it's a quick trip, but it's got such a specific purpose and you have such a way of wanting to be there for it. And why I asked you how you prepared, when you said, I feel prepared, it was to really gauge what your level of managing anxiety was. So proud of what you said is what you said was not. How did you prepare? Well, I thought about this. I thought about these scenarios. I thought about that. And I know that I can do this. And I'm ready for that. And I'm ready for this. And I'm ready for that. Like, all right, gearhead. It was so much more Green Beret. And part of, I just need to feel prepared. I think I'm prepared. Like, okay, what was that? It was recognizing I am Green Beret, not packing all the gear in the bag and feeling that in yourself. There's a little smile coming over your face.
Yeah. Well, and I think that prepared aspect of me in general goes across a lot more than just this weekend.
Absolutely.
First thing that popped into my head was I've always been a wreck going into job interviews or meeting new people. Always have, always. I can't say always will be because I'm getting better at that. But
hey, man, nice catch.
But I walked into my interview. I didn't know what the job was. I didn't know what was going on. It was completely out of my realm of comfortable. And I walked in super comfortable. And I was like, oh, yeah, this is because I've done this before. I'm prepared for this, air quotes, prepared for this.
Right. We can say experienced.
Yeah. And I felt confident in myself. And I'm taking that into this next weekend. I'm here. I'm present. I'm here for a reason.
I love how you're talking about this because it's about creating those new mile markers, as you say, that pathway is getting walked.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is fantastic because you're believing it more and more. The more you experience it, the more you go, oh, yeah, no, I've done this. I can do this.
Yeah.
It's what I used to say to you about when you first are trying a new route to get somewhere. The very first time you take that route, it takes forever. You're worried about turns and where to go and how to get there. After you've done it 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times, like whatever, it's just the route I go. It's almost automatic.
Yeah.
But that first time or two, it's weird. And you have to like really check your navigational system.
What I'm thinking about right now too on that is my first drive. I'm so caught up in the directions and getting there that I'm not enjoying sitting and looking.
Yeah.
And my 5th, 6th, 7th time down that path, now I can enjoy it and look around and take it all in and see the scenery and be like, oh, okay, this is a fun drive.
Yep.
Not oh my God, how are we going to get there?
If you have the chance this weekend at all to be a passenger rather than a driver, which you might because you probably have to take a car, it's a different view than when you're driving. When you're driving, you're so concerned with the navigation, with getting there, with the turns, with the road. Yeah. So it's opening that up a little bit and giving yourself the experience from different points of view and different angles. And you are creating that. And what you said, that confidence, that comes from feeling competent, from knowing I can. It doesn't matter how well, just that I can.
Yeah. Another big preparation that's happened in the last couple of months was me leaving workplace. And I think being on my own and struggling the way I have the last couple of months and trying to figure out what's next has in turn allowed me to have a lot more Green Beret than I was expecting. I was still trying to get prepared and do research and do all this other shit. And I think I'm a lot more Green Beret now than I ever have been. And I'm in a happy balance though. It's not like I'm so Green Beret where I'm not doing research or anything anymore. But I found that kind of like balance where it kind of still swings. It's just a lot smaller of a swing.
Exactly.
It's nice because I don't wake up anxious.
How do you sleep?
A lot better. A lot better. It's still very much there.
Sure.
But instead of having that 7 days a week, it's maybe 2 or 3. And I'm trying to get that down to none.
Yeah. And even noticing that it's there, I'm like, oh, okay, without beating yourself up for it.
Yeah.
You can use it to kind of fine tune and make adjustments and course correct. But when we beat ourselves up, that's tough because it's going to compound that feeling like shit.
Yeah. There's a difference between kicking your ass in gear and beating yourself up. That's exactly where I'm at. Half of me is kicking myself in gear and the other half is beating the shit out of myself of what I haven't done.
Right.
And I realized that doesn't get me anywhere. Me beating myself up, it's only for me.
Yeah.
Nobody else hears it. Nobody else sees it. You only see me staying at home.
They might also see a story that you've told yourself. And it's not necessarily what we project, because you can lie and project anything.
Yeah.
But we're talking about what emanates from you, that authenticity that comes out.
Yeah. And going back to my dad, I think I said this day one too. The biggest thing he's always told me, and this is my favorite thing that anybody's ever told me, is you can lie to everybody else. You can't lie to yourself. And I think that's the most true thing, especially like for what you're saying, because I can lie to everybody. I can lie to everybody, but that's not going to get me out of bed.
Yeah. I'll spin that one a little bit and go, you can't tell the truth to anybody until you can tell the truth to yourself.
Yeah, I like that.
I mean, if you think about, I don't want to lie to anybody. Okay, it starts with you. And part of the lie isn't an intentional lie. It's just a distortion. It's just an old narrative that isn't accurate, but we don't know it's not accurate until we look at it, test it, go, wait, that's not accurate. Oh, so then believing it is lying to yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I also want to throw in the love word there too. I don't think I can love anybody until I love myself. And I think I'm getting there. I think I'm getting back into that. And it feels better.
That's right. Because I can love them and I'll feel that love, but it'll be false if I don't love myself first and who I am and how I am. It's going to be codependent.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's not what I want. I figured that out already.
I'm like, we did that like week 7. That was easy. That's nothing, man. And we are back.
We certainly are. And I love how this episode started off. I'm just going to jump right in because...
Yeah, jump.
So, of course, you with your mother effing analogies, so good. But this one was like, to me, I was like, holy shit, I've never thought about that. So the idea was, I think Drew was talking to a friend of his about why he's in therapy. And you guys came up with, like, people work on mind, body, soul, but like so often people forget about their mind. And you were like, people take their car in for a tune-up. We even go get preventative, like we get physicals, but we don't get our mental health checked up on every once a year or anything. And it's just so interesting. Of course, I don't think that therapy is for only when there's a problem or if you're crazy or fucked up or whatever. Of course, I don't think that. I also just never thought preemptively.
Yeah.
The only thing I think that about is couples work. I think it's important for any kind of couple, whether it's a business relationship or whatever, to preemptively learn how to communicate with each other.
Right.
I always think that's good. But just in general, getting like the mental health checkup, brilliant.
Yeah, I love that. The idea of preventative medicine. It's why not that medicine for your mind? And I loved how he said, I think it's just a really healthy weekly routine for me. Like I can just, and then, he hit something and I'm sure you caught it and we'll get into this, not to transition away right away, but I'm going to transition away right away.
Damn it.
Where he said, it's a great place where I can just be. And that was, to me, I heard that and was like, yes, that's what we're trying to do is come up with a way for you to just be. And a lot of what we do in therapy is allow clients to be vulnerable, to be authentic, to figure their stuff out, and they feel comfortable in that space. And then we want to go, okay, you can do that in here. Now can you do that out there?
Right.
Because it's about you learning how to be anywhere you go. I like that he's recognizing that.
Yeah. My dad was a Boy Scout for a long time and became an Eagle Scout. He, to this day, probably every time I talk to him, which is fairly often, he'll say, are you keeping yourself physically strong, staying mentally awake and morally straight? I'm like, yes, sure am. That's like, I guess that was like their motto, mind, body, soul, however you want to look at it. But keeping your body fit, keeping your mind fit, keeping your soul fit.
Yeah. And he even said, like, I go to the gym, I go to church, and I come here.
Yep.
I love that. I've even had clients, for years where we do a lot of work in the beginning and they shift a way of thinking, they shift a core belief, and like, great. And we could easily be done if we wanted to be done.
Right.
And for a lot of clients, they're like, well, no, number one, personal spiritual growth is an ongoing thing. So I want to keep doing this.
Yeah.
And number two, it's that preventative piece. Like, well,
yeah,
I like knowing I have a space to come to every week or maybe every other week where if there's anything going on, I know I've got this space. I know I'm going to be okay. It's sort of like, I know we just had the Super Bowl. I can eat pizza, chips, and drink beer if that's what you want to do. And then you're going to go to the gym.
Yeah.
So like, well, I know I'm going to keep myself fit so I can slip if I slip or whatever it might be.
We're not saying that that's a slip. You can eat however you want as long as you stay healthy. But we get the point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he also said that in therapy, he can just be. He can be fully authentic and it's freeing. Yep. And he doesn't have to think about what he's going to say. And that he is noticing that more in his life outside of therapy. And yet, I don't know what he said, 70-30 or so, I don't know, something. But right. I just, look, like at the end of the day, I don't know that there's ever a time to say the exact same things in therapy to like say outside of therapy. First of all, why would half the shit come up? Second of all, like right. It would be a different conversation because whoever you're talking to will never have the same objectivity or unbiased or right. expertise, whatever you want to call it. But sure. Yeah, of course. Like, and it's great because you guys are connected. So he really does feel that way.
Yeah. And I love that he recognized it that way. So interesting to me that the very next thing he said when he was like, yeah, and I'm trying to do this in all aspects of my life. And then he started talking about mom.
Yeah.
Like right after that.
The whole thing was around him saying he asked her not to tell his dad and she told him right away. So then the next morning, his dad called him being like, what the fuck? So the point of it is that he felt like she's still lying.
Right.
Just about anything in general. And so he said, yeah, I'm going home, but I'm not staying there. And asked a friend of his or his ex or something, maybe if he gave himself an out by having the possibility of staying there. And you asked him, well, could you go home and not see your mom? And he was like, no, I couldn't.
Right.
And you said, well, what if they want to talk about money? And he's like, well, they can talk about it. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to tell them I don't want to talk about it. I would like for them to respect that because I'm coming home for a fucking friend's funeral and that's not what this is about. And he's seeing them again in another 2 weeks, which is like, why is that happening?
Well, he's just going back for the funeral. He's right. going to see them. And he was planning a trip out there to see them in a few weeks. But this was the funeral where he's got to go for the funeral. He's just going for like a day and coming back.
He goes home a lot.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to do. I mean, fast forward like a month from now.
Right.
And he's not going to be going anywhere for a while. But I think, yeah, talking about his old girlfriend and being able to stay with her, giving himself that out, right?
Right.
And when he was starting to recognize doing that, because we'd worked on that and talked about that way back in the bachelor party, like giving yourself an out by having dad there, or whatever it might be. I was highlighting the choice versus obligation and the boundaries versus rules with him. And I loved like going, well, I'm going to ask you a couple questions to see if you could do this.
Right.
Just to see how he would think about it.
Right.
And like you said, Meredith, the idea of like, could you go and not see your mom? He's like, no.
Right.
And looking at, Could he? Of course he could.
Sure.
But in terms of
would he?
His value of the son he wants to be is somebody who would see his mom, even if he's just home for a day.
Right.
And then, well, could you go there and not talk about this? He was like, yeah, absolutely. And then he added, but they might talk about it anyway.
Yeah.
Like, right. But if you have your boundary that you're not going to talk about it, you're not going to give them a rule like, hey, don't talk about this.
Right.
But you hold your own boundary.
Yeah. The kid with the bubble, the personal space, like, hey,
there we go.
I'm in my bubble here. And if he can't control it, if they try and invade his bubble, but he can take his bubble somewhere else.
Exactly.
And I think that was him saying he could go in the garage, but if he had to, if they just will not, if they are relentless about not respecting his bubble.
Yeah, just remove himself entirely.
Yeah.
And go to the garage was like code for him because that's where he would go to smoke
weed. Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I don't want to just smoke weed and be out of it. Like that's not, especially for the funeral, that's not how I want to be there.
Right. Totally.
But yeah, you're right when you talked about the money thing, like the thing about being mad that his mom kind of betrayed his trust by telling dad. That idea, like he's realizing like, right, this whole thing, I can't control what mom's going to do. Can't control what she's going to say. I can't control whether or not they bring up money.
Right.
He can go, well, hey, that bothered me that I have this boundary or I asked for this trust and you didn't do it.
Right.
Okay.
And I think you asked him, could you say to your mom, I'm disappointed in you that you told dad? And he said he could, but he's not ready yet. He'd like to someday. He can't or doesn't want to right now. And he's afraid it's going to bring up a ton of emotional stuff and that it's once again like that old story.
Well, it's something that you were listening back to this episode or this session.
Yeah.
Listening back to this session made me think of you saying, what conversation is he talking about? What conversation with his mom?
Right.
And even him just saying, I could say I'm disappointed, but I'm not going to, because that would lead to the larger conversation.
Right.
And the larger conversation for him has to do with that overall betrayal. How could you choose drugs over me? How could you choose OD over life?
Right.
That's the big betrayal. And that's, I think, the big conversation that he's holding. And when we address little things like this, I think it alleviates some of having that bigger conversation.
Right. Crazy that then he just throws out there that he got a job offer in New York, like his amazing dream job. Funny, not so funny part is he thought she would be so happy. And he said she broke down and was like, you can't go. And he was like, all right, I guess I'm not going then. And then hung up and was like, what in the fuck? And I get it. I definitely had those moments with my parents where my mom who was like, that's so far away, or I don't want you to go there, or not like you can't go, but just a definite, like I very much take into consideration my family when it comes to decisions about certain things, just because we're super, super close. And again, like, hey, it's my dream job. I'm moving. Amazing. Yes, do it. I'm so happy for you. Like, no, not like, sure, I'm going to miss you. I'm not going to see you as much, but I'll come visit and blah, blah, you know. And I get that that was his first reaction. And I guess I am curious. He never came back around to it. Like, did he take it? No.
Yeah, he lives in New York now. I didn't tell you.
Shut up. I hate when you do that.
But it was really interesting that was mom's reaction, and who knows what her true response would be if she gets to process it and how it went. But that first reaction that she was crying, and then he reacted to her reaction and brought back up that feeling responsible for her well-being.
Yeah.
It's not okay for people to be disappointed. I mean, he's learning that. Like, he references that 10% disappointment all the time.
Right.
Because allowing people to have 10% disappointment, like, can we give them that? Can that just be theirs and that be okay?
Right.
And I mean, we're here at literally the mother load. It's his mother, which is loaded.
Yeah.
And him going, yeah, her being that disappointed that I could move to New York. Okay, no, won't do it.
Right.
On the heels of us talking about learning to just be and wanting to just be. And he doesn't quite have that ego strength or whatever it might be for him to say, this job in New York is just sick. I got to take it. I will miss you also. And I recognize you're going to be disappointed.
Right.
And I'm going. And, you know, that's just how it is.
Right.
He's not quite there. And I don't know that he was really that motivated for himself to have the job in New York.
Yeah.
When he brought it up in this, he was saying the pressure that he was getting from his family was, are you going to start earning your own money?
That's why he said, oh, this is everything you wanted. Isn't this great?
Exactly.
Got it.
And it's almost like the subtext is, I'm doing this for you.
Right.
I'm doing this to prove something to you.
And then she's like, no.
Exactly.
And the other thing, and he talked about going home for the weekend or whatever for the funeral and how much that is going to bring up for him in general. Mm-hmm. All the people he's going to see from growing up. He said that his friend that passed away was actually his bully growing up.
Right. Yeah. He talked about this in an earlier episode that the guy used to be his bully and then
became his best friend.
Developed a friendship. And it was shortly after he and his brother had a big falling out.
Right.
That bully, that friend became the one that he leaned on so heavily because his brother just wasn't around. He even mentioned that in here. Like, I still haven't forgiven my brother for turning his back on me. And this guy who just passed away was there when I needed somebody.
Exactly. And I loved how his motto for the weekend is, I'm not okay and that's okay. And he was like, I'll tell everybody that. It's all good. Fine. And then got into the whole thing about seeing this girl, his ex, who he's now maybe hanging out with again, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Who wants to see him. She's going to be there too, right?
Yeah, we talked about her, I think, a week or two ago when she was near town and he saw her and he was getting that feeling of like, I'm not your boyfriend. I don't want that right now. Like, no. I'm
choosing you now, but maybe not tomorrow. That was like his thing. But
right. And he, I mean, in a sense, he was actually saying, I'm not even making a choice to see anybody right now. I'm making a choice to do me.
Well, yeah, right. And he talks about that a lot. Like, she's like, well, can I see you? Can we go together to funeral? And he was like, that's not what this trip is about, but I don't want to let her down. And I want to be present as myself and see how that is and his headspace and strengthening himself and seeing what comes up. And how does he convey that to her? Because he sort of said she's really smart and also naive and that like, she won't really be able to get it. And he connected, or you guys connected. He doesn't want to be responsible, or he doesn't want her to feel rejection or abandonment because he knows what that's like.
Yeah.
And I think I can relate to being her in the past, which is that like, I'm a planner. Like, am I going to see you? What are we going to do? Blah, 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 you know, and being highly sensitive or personalizing things that if the answer is no, or I don't know because I need to deal with this, it's really easy to personalize. Well, why don't you want to deal with it with me?
Why are you rejecting me?
Yeah. Why? So what does that have to do with anything? And it is easy to personalize but it's not his problem. It's both. It's the dialectic. I really don't want her to feel rejected. And at the same time, I have to put myself first and I'm sorry if you're disappointed, but I need to do this for myself, not being a dick, but like taking care of himself.
Yeah. Looking out for himself, like truly. And to me, this is where selfish is not a bad word.
Right.
It's looking after yourself and putting that first. Because so much of Drew is putting other people first.
Right.
And thinking about this girl, he's like, I don't want to say, yes, of course I'm going to see you. Because then I'm going to want to make sure she's okay. She's having a good time.
Right.
She's doing, and it's going to be about her. Same thing with parents. I need this to be about me and what I'm going through, not about me and my parents and our issues, or me and this girl and how she's feeling, and is there rejection, and did she personalize it? Because I know what that's like and I don't want that to happen. And he's not only is he putting sort of that safety bubble as a kid around himself to protect people, but he's putting that around himself to strengthen himself. You know, I mean, it's really just like, yo, give me some space. Like, let me just be here, do my thing. This is how I need to be here. If I'll interact with you. But he's recognizing if she comes into his space, even if she's got the best of intentions, I just want to support you for what you're going through.
Totally.
He's going to revert back to how he's been of making sure she's okay.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think he brought up how much progress he's seen in just sort of focusing on himself. He said when he used to go into job interviews, he was totally like a wreck. And this job interview recently was like really out of his realm, and he walked in just super comfortable, felt more confident, like felt comfortable in the uncomfortability and just killed it. And he talked about also not waking up anxious, sleeps a lot better, all super cool things.
I love it. To me, that's all like a function of him feeling his own power, feeling his own self. Early on, when I gave him the Green Beret versus the Boy Scout, being prepared, not by virtue of having all the gear ready, but of being yourself and knowing how you can just be, that he's seeing that, in job interviews and other places. And he's using like mile markers for his progress in day-to-day life. And he's seeing like, I can see this over time, how it's shifting over time. And I'll give him a lot of credit for being very patient with it.
Yes.
A lot of people are like, ugh, why isn't this different? How come this isn't changing? What's going on? And it feels like it's taken forever to get there. And I think we even use the analogy of, you and I've talked about this too, of when you're driving somewhere for the first time you take that route, it feels like it takes forever.
Right.
Right. Because you're so aware of the turns and the navigation, and did you get it right? Once you've done it a few times, you don't even need to open up a navigation app. You're just like, cool. Yeah, I know my way here. No problem.
Totally.
He's living that. He's starting to live that, and you can see it. I think you can hear it in how he's talking about it, these interactions. Yeah.
And at the same time talks about these things that are different, and talks about how he is beating himself up at times for what he hasn't done rather than kicking his ass into gear. There needs to be more of a balance, like we talked about last week, kicking our ass into gear and like going for it and doing things, as opposed to beating yourself up, judging yourself for what you haven't done. And he was like, no one else sees me sitting here beating myself up. Like, they just see me in bed or doing whatever. And one thing I love that he brought up, or you guys kind of discussed it. So, you can lie to everyone else, but not yourself.
Oh, that was his dad's line. His dad, he was like a quote from my dad that I love. Like, my dad used to say this to me, and like, great. I love that he's bringing that up.
Yeah.
From dad. That wasn't me saying that. That was him remembering dad. And exactly. You can lie to everybody else, but you can't lie to yourself.
What I loved about it was then you talked about having an old narrative and how you still tell it, even if it's not true. Mm-hmm. And I have found that throughout my life so much. Just for myself, I have this narrative that I tell myself about how shy I am, how I have so much social anxiety. And that is still true, but it's not nearly as true as it used to be. And so when I tell myself this old narrative, it still sticks there. And when I think about it, I'm like, wait, is that actually true? Because do I have social anxiety, quote unquote, or is it just like I prefer to be around smaller groups of people? But we all have an old narrative.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the Vader voice. And I say all the time, Vader never goes away. That voice is always going to be there. It's what do we do with it? For our old narrative and our old ways, we'd hear the Vader voice. We'd hear that critical voice in your head saying this to yourself, and we would believe it because we would never stop and think about it or challenge it or process it.
Right.
Having done that work in your life, well, yeah, you in particular, Meredith, but having done that work in one's life, you aren't going to be immune from hearing that voice. But when you hear it, you go, oh, wait, hang on. That's not true. But why is this coming up? Oh, okay.
Right.
You call it the dialectic. It's having both. It's, yes, this question and this doubt and this insecurity still comes up, and I can still be outgoing, and I can have my own narrative that's the one that I've crafted that I want to be true, and act on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was super cool. He's just like plugging along, and I'm excited to hear what happens after. So for next week, it will be after he goes home for the funeral.
Yeah. There was one more thing that we touched in this episode that I get really excited about, and I can't have the agenda, but every time I hear it, I jump on it.
What did I miss? Oh my God, go.
Did you miss it? I mean, maybe because we've talked about it before.
What?
But we were talking about things, and it was just a quick one that I threw out for him when we were talking about how he felt about taking care of mom, and if only he was better, mom would have chosen me. Then I kind of brought up his brother again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He's got a memory and an old narrative about brother. And he, even recognized, like,
Oh yeah, he's choosing to think about it differently, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he said, like, I think he actually used the language I used weeks ago when I brought it up. And I said, well, let me flip this for you. And he said in the session, he said, well, ever since we did that flip, now I'm just thinking about, oh, maybe he was protecting himself and protecting me. And that was the way it came out. He's starting to see brother's perspective without ever having talked to his brother about this yet.
I know. It's crazy. He's like, well, that's just what I'm going to think of it. I'm going to think of the more positive or whatever of the two instead of thinking he's this horrible guy.
Right. He's this bossy, like, you know, and there's this picture we can paint about brother who we've never met, who's a military guy and this bossy guy and very strict and rigid, you know, but he's kind of going, wait a second. Yeah, he was a kid too. And we were both probably scared and we were both protecting ourselves and maybe he was protecting me and that was his way to do it. And it's cool because I can see how there's going to be some reconciling with brother that doesn't necessarily have to be that big conversation.
Totally.
Right? That might just be a realization of, we were kids and now here we are.
Yeah, I love that. That was super cool. I wrote it down just because I didn't say it, Doug. Geez, way to call me out.
I knew you didn't miss it. I mean, to me, that's why I love being a therapist. And there's so much in these sessions that you guys hear and so many different directions we can go. And I try to kind of put pins in things and mark things because I know we're going to work on them and we can go into them. We don't necessarily dive into each one as it comes up.
Right.
But you can hear, I hope you guys can hear over time, some things shifting. Like Meredith, you were saying like, right. And he's not waking up anxious all the time anymore. Right. He's not having the panic attacks as much, you know, and it's that shift and that progress in him that he's recognizing now too, which is really cool.
Totally. Yeah. Yay, Drew.
Yay, Drew. And take the lesson, everybody, and get yourselves into therapy. Not because there's anything wrong with you, because it can be preventative and it can be personal growth. And we are all hopefully growing.
Yay.
That's my little soapbox.
I love it.
Righteous speech for the day.
Love it. And on that note, we'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, we'll be back with another session next week.
Yeah.
Come on back. Find us on social media, just about everywhere. Heck, we're on TikTok now too.
We sure are, Doug.
We are everywhere. We are in your living room, but not really because
COVID,
socially distant,
and that'd be weird.
Not going to happen.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.